So we're back at it, and it's been a long time, so we better remember where we were. When we stopped, we just managed one reading of Locke's treatise on toleration, so we had better remember what we learned from that reading. But I'd also like to check back in with the overall map of our semester. Where are we in our study? Well, we've gotten a new book, but we have started a new topic in our syllabus, one of our two big topics. The question we're considering is, what does it mean to be modern? We're aware that somehow we're different from past centuries, that the last 500 years or so have made big changes that make those modern centuries different from the long history of human beings that came before. But what's different about us? How can we understand ourselves as not just human beings, but modern human beings? So we've got two big themes, and the first one is science. We looked at that through Descartes and Rousseau, that there has always been science as long as there were people around to ask questions. But we do science in a different way, according to the scientific method, or we could say, in honor of Descartes, the Cartesian method. And that goes along with a new technology, and therefore things keep changing, so there's progress. That was a section of our class, and we did our best with that. Now we have the second great theme, which also is distinctive about moderns, that in the modern centuries, democracy is much more important. We look at it more favorably. We think that's the one best way for any government to organize itself. And so you can't understand yourself as modern without having some opinion about what science means and what democracy means. A complication with democracy is that it's got two definitions. There are two different ways to think about it, and we mix them together. We sort of mash them up without reflecting. They're not quite the same. So to begin thinking about modern democracy, we should distinguish these two. One is old and it's simple. There were democracies before the modern centuries. What's changed is that we're much more positive and exclusive to democracy in the modern centuries. It's the only way we like to do it. But this older view that's been around a long time, democracy simply means it's the rule of the majority. There are many ways you can organize your government. You can give power to different people. You can have a king. Democracy is not that. You can have an aristocracy, or that's the best class, or the upper class, the narrow class. That's not democracy. But democracy is where the common people, which practically means the workers, the farmers, the laborers, everybody, but that emphasizes the common thing. Everybody has power, and this somehow points to what's inadequate from our modern point of view, this first, simplest, easiest to understand definition of democracy. It's just one more way to consider who has the power, and that's not quite what we mean. And then Locke's toleration will point us more directly to what we do mean. In the modern era, we think of democracy as government by and for individuals. There is more freedom in democracy. That's why we favor it. The old view was just a question of who had the power, and you could do it one way and do it the other way. But democracy was clearly not superior to the others. It had advantages and disadvantages. Yeah. But freedom seems better than tyranny, and that's somehow bound up with what we mean by democracy. But why does democracy have a special relationship to freedom? Why should democracy be more free than others? The old centuries, of the pre-modern centuries, didn't like democracy better than the others because they thought, well, you can be ruled by a king, and that's good and bad. You can be ruled by the best people, the upper class, that's both good and bad. And you can be ruled by the people, that's both good and bad. It's just a question of who you want to give the power to. That's what politics consists in. But in the modern centuries, we say, well, we want to give some power, some rights and some abilities, some freedom to everybody, which is not quite the same as saying we want the majority to be able to do what it wants. And this is where toleration comes in. Toleration does not have its emphasis, its attention, its focus on the majority, but on minorities and individuals. This is the subject of Locke's book. Should we all have the right to pray to God in our own way? Well, there's nothing democratic about that according to the first definition, and the older definition. It's just a question of, when it comes to what the state religion should be, who do you want to make that decision? Would you like the common working people to decide how everybody should pray? That wouldn't be incompatible with democracy. On the ancient view, that's exactly what democracy would mean. And then some people would say yes, but some people would say no, we should have an aristocracy, among other things, because they'll make a better decision about the religion that everybody's got to have. But in this modern world, we think of democracy as going along with individual freedom from government. And this is distinctive and in some way paradoxical about modern democracy. It's a form of government, but in some way it's the opposite of government, because it means that you put limits on what governments can do. And that's our bigger question in this new section of our course that we've started with this one book. Should government in fact be limited? And should the minority groups or individuals therefore increase in their power by having these things we call rights? That's our big question for studying this book and for other texts that we'll have after.